I'm Diana, 34 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband, Tom, and our wonderful 5-year-old son, Sam. As a marketing manager for a growing tech firm, my life is a carefully managed balance of deadlines, client meetings, and school pickups. For years, I believed I had it all: a loving partner, a beautiful child, and a career I was proud of. But I was about to discover that the foundation of my perfect life was built on a series of carefully constructed lies. And the person I trusted most was actively helping to bring it all crashing down. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our home was always filled with a certain kind of energy. Tom, an architect, had designed it himself, an open-concept space with high ceilings and large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. It was meant to be a place of transparency and connection, a physical representation of the life we were building. But lately, the light felt different, harsher somehow, as if it were exposing cracks in the walls that I hadn't noticed before. The whispers started subtly, not with actual sound, but with a shift in the atmosphere. It began with my mother-in-law, Beatrice. A retired school principal, Beatrice carried an air of authority that never quite retired. She saw the world in black and white, right and wrong, with very little room for nuance. And in her world, she was always right. When she would visit, which was often, her presence would fill the house like a heavy fog. She'd rearrange the throw pillows on the couch, commenting on how they were more practical her way. She'd inspect the contents of my refrigerator, offering unsolicited advice on Sam's nutrition with a thinly veiled critique of my grocery shopping. "A growing boy needs more than just organic snack packs, Diana," she'd say, holding up a pouch of apple puree as if it were evidence in a trial. Tom would just laugh it off. "That's just Mom," he'd say, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "She means well." I tried to believe him. I really did. I told myself this was the normal friction of family, the price of admission for having in-laws who were involved. But her comments weren't just about pillows and groceries. They were little digs, carefully aimed at my capabilities as a mother and a wife. One afternoon, I came home early from work to find Beatrice and Tom in the kitchen, their heads closed together. They fell silent the moment I walked in. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the counter next to Beatrice. Tom's smile was strained. "Hey, honey, you're home early," he said, a little too brightly. "Mom was just telling me about her garden club." Beatrice simply nodded, her gaze cool and assessing. Later that evening, after she'd left, I asked Tom what they were really talking about. He became defensive. "It was nothing, Diana. Why are you always so suspicious of her? She's my mother and she's Sam's grandmother. She's just trying to help." His words stung. It wasn't just that he was defending her. It was the accusation in his tone, as if my unease was a character flaw. The whispers were getting louder, and now they were coming from my husband. He started second-guessing my decisions about Sam. When I wanted to enroll Sam in a play-based preschool, Tom, echoing a conversation I was sure he'd had with Beatrice, insisted on a more academic, structured program. "He needs discipline, Diana, not just finger painting," he argued. When Sam scraped his knee at the park, Tom's first question wasn't about Sam, but a critical, "Were you watching him closely?" The real turning point, the moment the whispers became impossible to ignore, was when we hired Isabella. We needed a nanny to help with the after-school hours, as my job was becoming more demanding. Isabella was a breath of fresh air. She was warm, patient, and Sam adored her instantly. She had a natural gift with children, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. But Beatrice saw her differently. To her, Isabella wasn't a help. She was an indictment of my failure to be a stay-at-home mother. "In my day, mothers raised their own children," she'd say pointedly during Sunday dinner, not looking at me but making sure I could hear. Tom would shift uncomfortably in his seat but say nothing. The tension in our house became a constant, humming thing. It was in the way Tom would look at his phone and quickly put it away when I entered the room. It was in the long, quiet car rides where we used to talk about everything and now talked about nothing at all. It was in the way Sam started acting out, feeling the stress that radiated from the adults around him. I felt like I was going crazy, questioning my own perceptions. Was I being too sensitive? Was I imagining the subtle shifts in my husband, the calculated coldness from my mother-in-law? I was a frog in a pot of slowly boiling water, and I was starting to feel the heat. I tried to talk to Tom again one last time to pull us back from the edge. We were in bed, the room dark except for the moonlight filtering through the blinds. "Tom," I said softly, "I feel like you and I are on different teams lately, and I feel like your mom is interfering." He let out a heavy sigh, the sound of a man who had already made up his mind. "Deanna, my mom is just concerned. She sees things. Maybe you're just too stressed with work. Maybe you're not seeing things clearly." He rolled over, turning his back to me. That was it. That was the moment I knew I was truly alone in my own home. The whispers weren't just in the walls anymore. They were in my husband's head, and they were telling him that I was the problem. The picture-perfect facade was crumbling, and I was terrified of what I would find in the ruins. The end came not with a bang, but with the crisp tear of an envelope. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those deceptively normal days that give you no warning of the devastation to come. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Sam had finally mastered tying his own shoes, and his triumphant grin as he showed me his work was the highlight of my morning. I left for work feeling a fragile sense of hope, a foolish belief that maybe things could still be fixed. Maybe Tom's distance was just a phase. Maybe Beatrice would find a new hobby. Maybe the sun was a sign of brighter days ahead. I was wrong. I arrived home that evening to a house that was eerily quiet. Usually, I'd be greeted by the sound of Sam and Isabella playing, their laughter echoing through the open-plan living space. But tonight, there was only silence. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I called out, "Hello, anyone home?" Nothing. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The kitchen was clean, too clean. No half-finished drawings on the table, no stray building blocks on the floor. It was sterile, like a hotel room. My heart began to pound against my ribs. I ran upstairs, my mind racing through 100 horrible scenarios. I threw open the door to Sam's room. His bed was neatly made. His toys were all put away in their bins. A wave of confusion washed over the fear. This level of tidiness was unheard of for a 5-year-old's room. Then I saw it. On the dresser, propped up against his favorite dinosaur lamp, was a single, thick manila envelope. My name was written on the front in Tom's neat, architectural handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It felt heavy, weighted with more than just paper. I sat on the edge of Sam's bed, the one where I'd read him countless bedtime stories, and opened it. Inside were legal documents. Cold, impersonal pages filled with dense paragraphs of text. I scanned the words, but my brain struggled to make sense of them. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Affidavit in support of motion. And then the phrase that made the world tilt on its axis. Request for sole custody. The words blurred as I read on. The petition, filed by Tom, painted a picture of me I didn't recognize. It described me as a neglectful and emotionally unstable mother, whose demanding career and erratic behavior posed a significant risk to the child's well-being. It was filled with lies, twisted half-truths, and cruel exaggerations. It cited specific dates and incidents, all taken out of context and warped into something monstrous. The time I was 10 minutes late to pick Sam up from preschool because of a traffic pileup was presented as habitual neglect. The time I cried in the car after a grueling day at work was evidence of my emotional instability. My decision to hire Isabella was framed as me outsourcing my maternal duties. Each sentence was a dagger, and with every word I read, I felt a piece of myself die. But it was the attached affidavits that truly broke me. There were several character statements from concerned parties, and there, in black and white, was a lengthy, signed statement from Beatrice. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. She described me as ambitious to a fault, more interested in my career than my child. She recounted conversations we'd had, twisting my words to make me sound selfish and uncaring. She detailed my short temper and my anxious episodes, painting a portrait of a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown, completely unfit to raise a child. Her words were the whispers I'd been hearing for months, now made official, notarized, and submitted to a court of law. She hadn't just been critiquing my parenting, she had been gathering evidence. This wasn't just interference. It was a calculated, systematic campaign to remove me from my son's life. And Tom, my husband. He had not only allowed it, he had co-signed it. He had taken her poison and served it to me in a legal document. The shock was absolute, a physical blow that knocked the air from my lungs. I crumpled the papers in my fist, a raw, guttural sob escaping my throat. I stumbled into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and saw the other half of the truth. Tom's closet was half empty. His things were gone from the bathroom. A short, sterile note was on his pillow. Diana, I've taken Sam to my mother S. I think it's for the best. My lawyer will be in touch. He didn't even have the courage to face me. He had used his mother's lies to steal my son and then vanished. The silence of the house was no longer just quiet, it was a gaping void. My home was gone. My husband was gone. My son was gone. The life I knew had been a lie, and the truth was a betrayal so profound it felt unsurvivable. I sat on the floor of my empty home, surrounded by the legal wreckage of my life, and I wept until I had no tears left. The sun had set and the house was dark, but a different kind of fire was starting to burn within me. The shock was turning into a cold, hard rage. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won. They had no idea who they were dealing with. For the next 48 hours, I operated in a fog of grief and fury. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah who listened to my frantic, tear-filled story with a calm, focused intensity. She read through the documents Tom had left, her expression growing sterner with each page. "This is a classic smear campaign, Diana," she said, her voice firm. "It's ugly, and it's designed to make you panic and fold. Our job is to prove that every single one of these claims is a malicious fabrication." Her confidence was a tiny island in my ocean of despair. But as we went through the allegations one by one, a sickening feeling of helplessness washed over me. It was my word against theirs. How could I prove that Beatrice had twisted my words? How could I prove that the incidents they cited were gross distortions of reality? They had been planning this for months, carefully collecting and curating their evidence while I remained oblivious. I felt like I was trying to fight shadows. My first supervised visit with Sam was torture. It took place in a sterile room at a family services center with a court-appointed monitor watching our every interaction. Sam was confused and quiet. He clung to me, asking why he couldn't come home. "Mommy's house is being fixed," I told him, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I could see Beatrice's influence in the things he said. "Grandma says I need to be a big boy and not cry." I saw Tom for a brief, cold exchange in the hallway. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "How could you do this?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "You know these things aren't true." He flinched but didn't back down. "It's for Sam's own good, Diana. He needs stability. My mother was right about you." His words were like a final twist of the knife. He wasn't just a pawn, he was a willing participant. He believed the lies. I went home to the empty, silent house, feeling utterly defeated. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the mountain of legal paperwork when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Diana, it's Isabella. I heard what happened. I am so sorry. Please, can we meet? There's something you need to see." My heart leaped. Isabella. In the chaos, I hadn't even thought about her. Tom must have fired her when he took Sam. I agreed to meet her at a small, quiet coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I saw her, her face was pale and her eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and anger. "I can't believe he did this to you," she said, her voice low. "He and his mother, they are not good people." She told me how it happened. Tom had come home early that Tuesday with Beatrice. He'd given Isabella a severance check and told her that her services were no longer required. Beatrice had stood behind him, her arms crossed, watching with a smug satisfaction. Isabella had tried to ask about me about Sam, but Tom had just stonewalled her, saying it was a private family matter. "But that's not why I called you," Isabella said, leaning forward and lowering her voice even more. "For the last few months, I've had a strange feeling. The way Beatrice would talk to Tom when she thought I wasn't listening. The questions she would ask me about you." She paused, then reached into her large tote bag and pulled out a simple, spiral-bound notebook. "I'm a bit old-fashioned," she explained, a faint blush on her cheeks. "When I was studying early childhood education, they taught us to keep a detailed daily log. Notes on activities, meals, mood, developmental milestones, anything significant. I kept doing it with Sam. It helps me track his progress. She pushed the notebook across the table towards me. I started writing down other things, too. Conversations I overheard. Odd things Beatrice said or did. At first, I just thought she was overbearing, but then it started to feel different, more calculated. I started recording everything. I opened the notebook. Isabella's handwriting was neat and precise. Each entry was dated and timed. The first few pages were exactly what you'd expect. 3:15 p.m., Sam ate an apple and told me about the school fire drill. 4:00 p.m., we built a Lego castle. His fine motor skills are improving. But as I flipped further, the entries began to change. October 12th, 4:30 p.m., Beatrice arrived unexpectedly. Tom was on the phone. She asked me if Diana seemed overwhelmed lately. I said no, she seemed fine. Beatrice sighed and said, "She puts on a brave face, but I worry." October 19th, 5:00 p.m., overheard Beatrice telling Tom on the porch, "A mother who relies on a nanny for everything isn't truly present. Sam needs consistency, not a rotating cast of caregivers. She knows I am here full-time." November 4th, 1:15 p.m., Beatrice found a bottle of cooking wine in the pantry and showed it to me with a concerned look. Asked if Diana ever drinks during the day. I have never, ever seen Diana drink anything but coffee or water while working from home. Page after page, it was all there. A meticulous, dated, and timed record of Beatrice's campaign. Every passive-aggressive comment, every leading question, every attempt to plant seeds of doubt. Isabella had documented Beatrice's attempts to bribe her for negative information about me, her habit of tidying up my home office and looking through my papers, and her constant narrative to Tom that I was stressed, unhappy, and neglectful. The logbook was a step-by-step blueprint of their conspiracy. It systematically dismantled every single allegation in Tom's petition. The erratic behavior was me having a stressful work call. The habitual neglect was a single instance of being late that Beatrice had blown out of proportion. The instability was Beatrice's own invention, whispered into Tom's ear until he believed it. I looked up at Isabella, tears welling in my eyes. "Isabella, this is..." I couldn't find the words. "It's the truth," she said simply. "And I'm willing to sign an affidavit and testify to every word in here." It wasn't just a logbook. It was a weapon. It was the proof I needed, the one thing that could cut through the shadows and expose their lies for what they were. The grief and helplessness that had consumed me began to recede, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a cold, clear sense of purpose. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was about taking back my life and my son. The game had changed. They had their affidavits based on lies and manipulation, but I had a logbook filled with the truth, and it was time to fight back. Armed with Isabella's logbook, my entire perspective shifted. I was no longer a victim reacting to an attack. I was an investigator building a case. My lawyer, Sarah, was ecstatic. "This is gold, Diana," she said, her eyes scanning the pages of the notebook. "A contemporaneous, third-party record. A judge will take this very seriously. This nanny of yours is a godsend." But Sarah's legal mind immediately went a step further. "This logbook is our foundation," she explained, "but we need to build on it. Beatrice is a retired principal. She's used to being in control and manipulating systems. Tom is an architect. He's meticulous and detail-oriented. They planned this. Let's see if we can find the rest of their blueprints." The investigation became my full-time job. I took a leave of absence from work, explaining that I was dealing with a critical family emergency. My boss, a woman who had always been supportive, thankfully didn't press for details. My focus narrowed to a single objective, dismantling the case against me, piece by piece, and building an airtight one against them. We started with the financials. Sarah's firm subpoenaed Tom and Beatrice's financial records for the past year. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but as Sarah reminded me, they had invaded my life first. While we waited for the records, I focused on the specific allegations in their petition. I became a detective in my own life. The petition claimed I had missed a critical parent-teacher conference due to work commitments, showing a clear disregard for Sam's education. I remembered that day vividly. I hadn't missed it. The conference had been rescheduled by the teacher at the last minute, and she had called me personally to apologize and set up a new time. I found the email chain with the teacher confirming the change. I printed it out. Check. Another allegation stated I had left Sam with a high fever while I attended a work dinner. Another lie. Sam had a mild cold. I had a thermometer log on my phone that showed his temperature never went above 99.5 degrees F. I had texted Tom pictures of Sam happily playing before I left and checked in 3 times while I was out. I had screenshots of the texts. Check. The claim of my emotional instability was harder to disprove, as it was so subjective, but Isabella's logbook gave me an idea. She had noted several instances where Beatrice would call or visit right after I'd finished a particularly stressful meeting, as if she were waiting for me to be at my most vulnerable. How would she know my schedule? I always shared my work calendar with Tom so we could coordinate our family life. I opened my calendar app and looked at the sharing settings. Tom still had full access. On a hunch, I checked the access logs, and there it was. Tom's account had accessed my calendar repeatedly, but there was another account I didn't recognize. Evans1959@gmail.com, Beatrice Evans. Tom had given his mother direct access to my work schedule. She knew exactly when I had a board presentation, a project deadline, or a difficult client review. She was timing her ambushes, deliberately creating situations to provoke a reaction from me, and then reporting my stress back to Tom as a sign of my incompetence. The cold-blooded, predatory nature of it made my blood run cold. When the financial records arrived, the picture became even clearer. 2 months before Tom filed for custody, a payment of $10,000 was transferred from Beatrice's savings account to Tom's personal account. The memo line was blank. A week later, Tom made a $10,000 payment to one of the most ruthless family law attorneys in the city. Beatrice hadn't just provided the moral support for this attack, she had financed it. She had paid for the lawyer who was trying to take my son away from me. But the most damning piece of evidence came from a place I never expected, my own home. One evening, I was sorting through a box of old electronics in the basement, looking for a charger. In the bottom of the box, I found one of Tom's old digital audio recorders, a small silver device he used to use for site meetings before he started using his phone. I was about to put it aside when I noticed the battery light was blinking. It still had a charge. Curiosity got the better of me. I put on a pair of headphones and pressed play. It was mostly old recordings of meetings, the sound of construction in the background. I fast-forwarded through them and then I heard it. Beatrice's voice, clear as day. "You have to be strong, Tommy. This is for Sam's future. She's so wrapped up in her career, she can't see what's important anymore." Then Tom's voice, hesitant and full of doubt. "I don't know, Mom. She's a good mother. She loves him." "Loving him isn't enough." Beatrice's voice was sharp, cutting. "She's not providing the right environment, the structure, the discipline. A boy needs his father and he needs a grandmother who can provide the stability his mother can't. You need to document everything. Every time she's late, every time she seems stressed. Write it down. Your lawyer will need it all. It's the only way the court will see the truth." My hands were shaking. I checked the date stamp on the file. It was from 6 months ago. Tom had accidentally recorded one of their planning sessions. He had captured his own mother coaching him on how to build a fraudulent case against me. He had voiced his own doubts, admitting he knew I was a good mother, and she had bulldozed right over them, manipulating him back into her narrative. I had it all. The logbook, the emails, the calendar logs, the bank statements, and now, their own voices plotting against me. I had connected all the dots, and they formed a horrifying picture of deceit and betrayal. But it was also a picture that would set me free. Sarah's advice echoed in my head. They planned this. She was right, and their meticulous planning was about to become their undoing. With our evidence compiled into an undeniable arsenal, Sarah's legal strategy shifted from defense to offense. "We could present this in court, and we would win, no question," she said, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the thick binder we had assembled. but a court battle will be long, messy, and traumatic for Sam. It will be public. Beatrice and Tom have tried to handle this quietly, using the system to ambush you. I suggest we turn the tables and force them to confront this in a private setting first. We give them one chance to surrender before we go nuclear. The idea was terrifying but also deeply appealing. I didn't want to drag Sam through months of custody evaluations and court dates. I wanted this to be over. I wanted them to see what they had done, to have their lies exposed directly to their faces, with no lawyers to hide behind. Sarah helped me draft the invitation. It was simple and formal. I invited Tom and Beatrice to my house for dinner on Sunday evening to discuss Sam's future and a possible path forward. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. In their minds, I was the one on the ropes, likely ready to beg for a settlement. Beatrice would see it as her victory lap, a chance to dictate the terms of my surrender. Tom, ever the conflict avoider, would see it as an easy way out. They both replied within the hour, accepting the invitation. The next few days were spent in a state of controlled, anxious preparation. It felt like planning for both a dinner party and a battle. On the one hand, I was choosing a menu, buying groceries, and cleaning the house. On the other, Sarah and I were rehearsing what I would say, organizing our evidence, and setting up the stage. We decided to use the audio recording as our centerpiece. I bought a new set of high-quality Bluetooth speakers and placed them discreetly on the bookshelf in the dining room. I synced the audio file from Tom's old recorder to my phone, ready to be played with a single tap. The binder of evidence, Isabella's notarized logbook, the emails, the calendar logs, the financial records, I placed inside the sideboard, out of sight but easily accessible. On Sunday evening, my house was once again quiet, but this time it wasn't a void. It was the calm before the storm. I set the table with the good china, the plates we had received as a wedding gift. It felt fitting to use the symbols of our union to preside over its dissolution. I cooked Tom's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. I wanted every detail to lull them into a false sense of security. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and opened the door. Beatrice stood there, a picture of smug matriarchal concern, a homemade apple pie in her hands. "Diana, dear, I thought a nice dessert might help things feel a bit more civilized," she said, her smile not reaching her cold, calculating eyes. Tom stood behind her, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my gaze. He just muttered a quiet, "Hello, Diana." I smiled back, a calm, serene smile that I had practiced in the mirror. "Beatrice, Tom. Thank you for coming. Please come in." I led them to the dining room. The aroma of the roast chicken filled the air. I saw Tom relax slightly, the familiar scent of home momentarily soothing his guilt. Beatrice surveyed the perfectly set table with an approving nod, likely interpreting it as my attempt to prove I was still a capable homocrat. We sat down, and for a few minutes, we engaged in painfully stilted small talk. Beatrice asked about my job. Tom commented on the weather. It was a surreal performance of normalcy, a play we were all acting in before the true drama began. I served the food, pouring the wine and making sure their plates were full. I let the silence stretch after the first few bites, letting the tension build. Finally, Beatrice put down her fork and dabbed her mouth with a napkin, assuming her role as the one in charge. "Diana," she began, her tone a condescending mix of sympathy and authority. "I'm glad you've decided to be sensible about this. We all want what's best for Sam. Tom and I are prepared to be very generous with visitation, provided you agree to the custody arrangement." Tom just stared at his plate, moving a potato around with his fork. He was letting her speak for him, as he always had. I took a slow sip of water, holding Beatrice's gaze. "What is it exactly that you think is best for Sam?" I asked, my voice even and calm. Beatrice straightened her back. "He needs stability, dear, a consistent environment. With Tom's steady presence and my support, he will have that. Your career, your emotional fluctuations, it's just not a suitable primary environment." I nodded slowly. "My emotional fluctuations. You mean, for example, the stress you observed after you checked my work calendar to see when I had a major board meeting, and then decided to show up unannounced to critique my housekeeping?" Beatrice's smile faltered. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Tom looked up from his plate, a frown forming. I continued, my voice still quiet but now laced with steel. Or are you referring to my neglect, like when I was supposedly drinking on the job, a concern you raised with Isabella after finding the cooking wine you yourself had moved to the front of the pantry? Beatrice's face paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I said. I stood up and walked to the sideboard. You see, for months, you've been telling a story about me being an unfit mother. It's a very detailed story, full of dates and incidents. The problem with your story is that someone else was keeping a record, too. I pulled out the thick binder and placed it on the center of the table with a solid thud. This is a story of what really happened. Let's start with Chapter 1, Isabella's Logbook. I opened the binder. Tom stared at it, his face a mask of disbelief. Beatrice looked as if she'd seen a ghost. The Last Supper was served. The main course was about to be the truth. The atmosphere in the dining room had transformed. The comforting aroma of roast chicken was gone, replaced by the icy chill of exposure. Beatrice stared at the binder as if it were a venomous snake, her carefully composed facade crumbling into a mask of pure shock. Tom looked back and forth between the binder and me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. He was finally realizing this was not the negotiation he had been led to expect. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer before I spoke, my voice devoid of the emotion that had been churning inside me for weeks. It was cold, precise, and utterly controlled. This binder contains everything, I began, flipping open to the first page, a copy of Isabella's notarized affidavit. It has a daily, timed log from Isabella, documenting every manipulative comment, every leading question, every lie you told her, Beatrice. It details your attempts to get her to spy on me and your frustration when she refused. I turned a page. It has the email chain with Sam's teacher, proving that I did not miss the parent-teacher conference. It has the screenshots of my texts with you, Tom, showing Sam was perfectly fine the night of my work dinner. It has the server logs from my work calendar, showing your mother's email address accessing my private schedule. Beatrice made a small, choking sound. This is ridiculous. That girl was always a troublemaker. Was she? I countered, my eyes locking onto hers. Or was she just the one person you couldn't fool? I then turned my attention to Tom. His face had gone from pale to ashen. And for you, Tom, it has the bank statements. The $10,000 transfer from your mother's account right before you paid the retainer for your high-powered lawyer. She didn't just encourage you, she paid you to betray me. Tom flinched as if I'd slapped him. Diana, it wasn't like that. Wasn't it? I cut him off. You stood by and let her poison our marriage. You let her convince you that I, the mother of your child, was a danger to him. You signed your name to a document filled with disgusting lies, lies you knew were untrue. You abandoned your son and your wife based on the manipulations of a bitter, controlling woman. Beatrice finally found her voice, a shrill, indignant cry. How dare you? Everything I did for my son and my grandson. You were never good enough for him. Always so focused on your career, leaving my son to raise that child alone. Leaving him alone? I let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. Tom, when was the last time you packed Sam's lunch? Or scheduled a doctor's appointment? Or stayed home with him when he was sick? I have supported your career, your ambitions, your entire life, while building my own and being the primary parent to our child. The only thing you've done alone is conspire with your mother to ruin my life. That was when Tom finally broke. He slumped in his chair, putting his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, Diana, he mumbled into his palms. She got in my head. I didn't know, I didn't think. No, I said, my voice like ice. You didn't think. That's the problem. You let her do your thinking for you. Beatrice, however, was not one to surrender. Rage was now replacing her shock. You can't prove any of this. It's just the word of a disgruntled nanny against a loving grandmother. Is it, Beatrice? I asked softly. I was hoping you'd say that. I agree, sometimes written words aren't enough. It's so much more powerful when you can hear it in someone's own voice, don't you think? I picked up my phone from the table. I saw a flash of pure panic in Tom's eyes. He remembered. He knew what was coming. I tapped the screen. The room fell silent, and then Beatrice's voice filled the space, tinny and sharp from the speakers on the bookshelf. You have to be strong, Tommy. This is for Sam's future. The recorded conversation played out, every word echoing in the tense silence of the dining room. We all listened to her coaching Tom on how to document my failures. We heard Tom's weak protests, his admission that he knew I was a good mother. We heard Beatrice's forceful, manipulative response, pushing him, guiding him, cementing her plan. It's the only way the court will see the truth. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Tom's ragged breathing. Beatrice was frozen, her face a grotesque sculpture of disbelief and fury. She had been caught in her own trap, condemned by her own words. I let the weight of it all settle on them. "So," I said, finally breaking the silence, "here is my path forward. You will both go to your respective lawyers tomorrow morning. You, Tom, will withdraw the petition for divorce and sole custody. You will sign a statement, under oath, admitting that the allegations against me were false and coerced by your mother. You, Beatrice, will sign a legally binding agreement that you will have no contact with me or Sam ever again. If you refuse, this entire binder, along with this audio file, goes directly to the judge, the state bar, and a few local news reporters I happen to know. Your reputation as a respected princip. Al will be gone, you will be exposed as a perjurer and a manipulator. I will sue you for defamation and malicious prosecution. I will take everything." Tom looked up, his eyes red and pleading. "Diana, please, can't we just—" "No," I said, the word final. "There is no we. You destroyed that. This is not a negotiation. These are my terms. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to comply." I stood there, watching the two people who had tried to ruin me. The powerful matriarch was speechless, her authority stripped away. The husband I had once loved was a broken man, staring at the wreckage of the life he had allowed his mother to detonate. The whispers in the walls were finally silent, replaced by the undeniable, unmissable sound of the truth. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but a quiet, controlled demolition. As promised, the next morning, my lawyer Sarah received a call from Tom's attorney. He was, in her words, exceptionally cooperative. The petition was withdrawn by noon. A few days later, I received the documents Tom had signed. It was all there in black and white. A full retraction of every allegation, a formal apology for the emotional distress, and a sworn statement detailing his mother's undue influence and manipulation that led to the filing. He had completely and utterly capitulated. Beatrice's compliance came via a different, more dramatic route. Her lawyer, a blustering man who initially tried to threaten us with a countersuit for extortion, fell silent after Sarah played him 30 seconds of the audio file over the phone. The signed no-contact agreement arrived by courier the next day. I never saw or spoke to Beatrice again. Tom moved out of the house. Our separation was swift and clinical. He didn't fight me on anything. I got the house, primary custody of Sam, and a generous child support agreement. In our final meeting with the lawyers to sign the last of the papers, he tried to speak to me one last time. "Diana, I know sorry isn't enough," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I truly am. I was weak and I ruined everything. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I looked at him, the man I had shared a decade of my life with, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even pity, just a profound and empty distance. "Yes, you did," I said, my voice flat. "And that's something you will have to live with." I signed the papers and walked out without a backward glance. The first few months of my new life were about rebuilding. The house that had once felt like a prison of whispers slowly began to feel like a sanctuary. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls, and packed away every photo of Tom and his family. I was reclaiming my space, erasing the ghosts of the past. Isabella stayed on as our nanny, becoming an even more integral part of our little family. Her presence was a constant, comforting reminder of loyalty and truth in a world where I had known so much deception. She and I became close friends, our bond forged in the fires of the battle we had won together. My relationship with Sam flourished. Without the constant tension and the toxic influence of his father and grandmother, he was like a different child. He was happier, more relaxed, his laughter once again filling the halls of our home. We established our own routines, our own traditions. We had Friday night movie marathons with too much popcorn. We spent Saturdays exploring parks and museums. We built a life, just the two of us, that was peaceful, joyful, and entirely our own. Healing was not a linear process. There were days when a wave of anger would wash over me, the sheer audacity of their betrayal taking my breath away. There were nights when I would lie awake, mourning the family I thought I had and the future that had been stolen. But with each passing day, the pain lessened, replaced by a growing sense of strength and self-reliance. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal imaginable, and I had not only survived, but I had emerged stronger. I had fought for my son, for my name, and for my sanity, and I had won. About a year later, I ran into an old mutual friend of Tom's and mine at the grocery store. After some awkward small talk, she hesitantly told me what had become of them. Tom had quit his job at the prestigious architectural firm and was now doing freelance work from a small apartment across town. He had become quiet and withdrawn, losing touch with most of their friends. Beatrice, she said, had become a recluse. The shame of what had happened, which had inevitably trickled out through the legal grapevine, had shattered her reputation in their tight-knit community. The powerful matriarch who thrived on control and public image was now a prisoner in her own home, her reign of manipulation over. I felt a flicker of something, not satisfaction, but a sense of cosmic balance. They had tried to burn my life to the ground, and in the end, the fire had consumed them instead. I finished my shopping, went home to my son, and didn't think of them again. My life was no longer defined by their story. I was writing my own, a story of resilience, of a mother's fierce love, and of the quiet, unshakable peace that comes from building a new life on a foundation of truth. The house Tom had built was just a structure, but the home Sam and I created within its walls was real, it was strong, and it was ours.